Sri Lanka decides.
225 parliamentary seats are up for grabs at today's polls. Good evening and welcome. This is Newsfirst, first and fast elections news coverage in view of the general elections 2024. We are live from Stein Studios in Ratmalana, your election headquarters. Voting began at 7 this morning, ended at approximately around 4 p.m. across 13,421 polling centers across 22 districts in Sri Lanka. There were 17 million people who were eligible to cast their votes today. However, only 60 to 65% of the voters turned out at today's poll. To discuss all this and more, we have three individuals to give us a little bit of insight with regard to the voter turnout as well as the past results of the elections, including women's representation in Parliament. How important is it? We have Nilesh Letambi, Consultant Director at Newsfirst. We have Sonali Varigavabaduge, who's an attorney at law, joining us this evening on the show as well. And then we have Nadim Majid, an independent journalist as well. We have Naveksha Gunasekar to give us an insight with regard to the past results and give us a comparison with regard to the performance of the last elections as well. We have Theruni as well as Martin to give us some insight with regard to the elections as well. So before we start off, let's quickly cross over to Theruni to understand what the results so far has been out. And let's quickly speak to Naveksha with regard to past performance of these results as well. Theruni, already we have the results of Gaul and Ratnapura.
Yes, Shamir. So we have two postal vote results that have come out already. In both those postal vote results, the National People's Power has dominated with approximately 79% of votes, which is a massive lead. So far, if the momentum is maintained, we should be getting more results pretty much anytime soon. We are on standby.
Naveksha, 79% of the postal votes that have been cast already in Ratnapura as well as Gaul have gone in favor of the NPP. Tell us a little bit about the past performance of these results in comparison with the 2020 general elections and 2015 general elections as well.
Yeah, Shamir, like you said, if we look at the parliamentary election in 2020, the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna have secured 430,334 votes. That is securing 7 seats with a majority of 70.54%. And followed by the Samagi Janabada Vegaya securing 1,015,456 votes with only just 2 seats. And ironically, the National People's Power did not receive even 1 seat. They were not able to even secure 1 seat because they had only 29,963 votes back in 2020. However, as of today, they have secured 32,296 votes. That is if you take the parliamentary election in 2020. If you go to the 2015 elections, you see the UPFA securing 312,518 votes with 6 seats, and followed by the United National Party, who then secured 4 seats by receiving 265,180,000 votes. We do not see any of these parties in the leaderboard this time around. The JVP back then in 2015 secured 0 seats, once again no seats, because they had only 37,778 votes. What does that tell us?
What does that tell us? Nilesh, now interesting remarks. Now, Naveksha pointed out that in 2015, JP was not even able to secure a seat in these areas before. However, now, this time around, it's very evident that we are going in a direction in which the NPP may take a majority in Parliament as far as 2024 general election is concerned.
Yeah, Shamir, what I can see right now, given just these 2 results that we have, is the absolute devastation to the opposition. And it's very sad because the country needs a strong opposition. But as you said, so far the NPP has 79.22% of the postal vote.
So, Nadim, interesting if you look at the numbers this time around as far as the election voter turnout is concerned. We saw approximately 75% of the eligible voters casting their vote at the last presidential elections. However, this time around, we see only 60 to 65% going to the polling booth and exercising their franchise. What does it goes to show to the people of Sri Lanka? Are they really interested in politics? Are they really interested in elections anymore?
I
can't speak for, people broadly, because people might have different reasons for not going to the polls. You might have your, diehard UN peers, diehard SLP peers, etc. who go. But I think the problem for the NPP is a problem of legitimacy, because as voter turnout in the mid to low 60s is something you expect at a local government election, not at a parliamentary election. So for the NPP, I mean, they are a legitimate government, but the legitimacy of a mandate that you get with a voter turnout of 65% or less is problematic.
Yeah, but if you look at the overall figures, Nadeem, now, right after a presidential election where the NPP got approximately 42% of the votes cast, that gave him a majority. As a result of that, Anurakumar Dissanayake went on to become the executive president of Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
So that shows that the next election, there will be a voter turnout that would be formidable, at least for the opposition, because that means 58% of the votes which have been casted have been against
And the thing is,
President Anurakumar
the
Dissanayake.
thing is this as well, right? Now, the NPP and President Anurakumar Dissanayake obviously have the realization that this is just the first in a series of elections they're going to be facing. There's the local government elections, which have been postponed, which the Supreme Court has ordered must be held, which they will have to face. What will voter turnout be like at that? Is it going to be lower than this? And then after, of course, the provincial council elections, which have not been held since 2013 or 14, I believe, was the last provincial council election that we had in this country.
9 years. That's 2015
right.
was
So,
the last election.
Yeah, the Uber provincial council election, I believe. So, what is the turnout going to be there? Is it going to keep, are people going to be more and more disengaged? What does that mean for the legitimacy of the NPP's mandate?
If you look at the last election, now this is the 10th election that is being held in Sri Lanka, parliamentary election that is being held in Sri Lanka, subsequent to the 1978 constitution being coming into play. But the 16th election since 1948, Sri Lanka gained independence. And the biggest topic that has been discussed in the recent past at elections is the fact that women's representation, what must the political parties in their nomination list give prominence to women. But we don't see that happening even at this election. Now, this was something that was discussed even before the presidential election. Now we have a prime minister who is a woman. However, we don't see that being reflected down the line, even in the NPP list.
Yeah, Shamir, the reality is that this is all a boys' club, and this has been the case throughout history. The underlying patriarchal structures that form what is the Sri Lankan societal system, and the misogyny doesn't permit women to easily access positions of leadership, especially in parliament. Now, to counter this, we have had a quota system being introduced for the local government through the Local Authorities Election Amendment Act in 2017. However, women's groups and other stakeholders have continuously been trying to bring in a quota system for parliamentary elections as well. Now, someone can ask the question, why should women be given preferential treatment? The reason is this. Usually when there are marginalized or vulnerable groups or aggrieved groups in communities, the state has a responsibility to take affirmative action to bring them in. And I'll give examples, right? The case of Rwanda, where there's 30% gender quota, El Salvador, Cote d'Ivoire, Mexico, Algeria, Kazakhstan, these are countries which have brought in a quota for female representation in parliament, which allows for more gender parity.
But if you look at countries like Kazakhstan, the countries that you mentioned, Sonali, these are not in a democratic framework that functions as democracies worldwide. And if you look at the numbers that you quipped with regard to the quota system in Sri Lanka, let's take a look at the 2017 local government elections. We've seen the manner in which how women in certain areas lost their seats. However, they came through the back door because of the women's quota system that was in place. So many said that this system did not work. So we are still looking for a good system to work in Sri Lanka.
Sure.
And we don't have that system.
Sure, it's not the best. Quota system is not the best system. But
you are advocating.
No. It is one of the ways in which affirmative action can be taken. you know what really needs to be
I
done?
think, Sonali, the quota should not be on the number of people elected, but on the nomination list itself. Because the problem is that there is a lot of disingenuity within the political parties.
Yeah, and
they
no
don't really
intra-party
want
democracy.
Because at the
right?
end
There's
of the
no
day,
intra-party
it's the
democracy.
people who should elect who they want. At least the nomination list has to reflect the women representation at the end of the day, as Nadeem correctly mentions.
You know, most of the women that come on our program, if they look at positions in political parties, they're all vice chairs.
Yeah, so yes,
we saw parties like the NPP on social media trumpeting that they have so many women nominated. But it was only about 35 women out of 39, I stand corrected, out of 291 nominees. From that party.
Approximately 16% if you look at the number.
That's ridiculous, no? And this election was the election for system change. So, like Sonali said, it's a boys' club, but it's not just a boys' club, it's an all boys' club.
So, we'll get back to that. I just want to ask Nagesha, why don't you go back to the 2020 local election results, how the divide happened, because the NPP was only able to get 3 seats at this election as well, if I'm not mistaken, Naveksha.
Yes, if you look at the postal voting results in 2020 of the Ratnapura district, the SLPP was able to secure 21,921 votes, but today, unfortunately, they have been able to only secure 1,031
Naveksha, the
votes.
overall figure, let's look at the overall figure where the Gotabaya Rajapaksa administration at that time got 6.9 million votes. Until you get that across the board, I just want to pick Niresh's brain. Now, Niresh was talking about even the NPP failed to field considerable amount of candidates
the
for
SJB
their
was much worse.
Nomination list.
The SJB was much worse. Most parties were much worse. There were a few smaller parties which ran in just a few districts. There was one which ran in only the Colombo district, which had even a majority of women. But
that's an independent group that was led by Dr. Ajanta, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
where there were 19 members, 16 of them were women.
But again,
like
I mean, on that, like with the smaller parties also, it's very
they're not likely to get.
I remember
a lot of MPs.
No, but at the end of the day,
there was a party called the Citizens Front, which ran an all-women list.
Yeah, but at the end of the day,
district,
at the end of the day, Nadeem, I think it's a responsibility of the people, because they have to elect whether it's women or men they want in Parliament. It's ultimately the responsibility of the citizen who goes to the polling booth and exercise their franchise, Sonali. It's not that we should restrict them. Now, let's take a look at what happened in the last Parliament, for an example. We saw the manner in which how mud was slung at most of the women parliamentarians. But even the women parliamentarians were not staying strong for the cause of protecting the rights of women itself. Not even men did that. Yes, of course, we agree. But even the women did not stand for the rights of the women parliamentarians in Parliament.
There is no level playing field. We all understand that. There is a lot of misogyny. We also understand that. There's also a lot of internalized misogyny where women are pitted against women, and sometimes women don't vote for women. And this is the internalized misogyny. We're talking about generations of this being internalized.
Can I just add something to that? In the previous Parliament, the Women's Caucus was headed by Sudhajini Fernando-Bulle, and they did actually get a fair amount of work done. I won't give them too much credit, but you have to give them the due credit. They did get a fair amount of work done in pushing for certain reforms. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done. But the thing is, as Sonali said, when the playing field is so uneven, you can't really.
No, but let's take a look at the voter turnout for an example. Yeah, but let's take a look at the voter turnout for an example, Niresh. Now, 60 to 65% of the eligible voters cast their franchise today in the Parliament.
Shamir, it's shocking.
For the Parliamentary
elections. There are countries in the world where people are fighting and dying for the right to vote, and here in Sri Lanka, nobody fought and died for it. In 1931, we were just handed the vote, the right to vote, even when 16 years before the British left, basically. And we got to vote for the state councils, I think twice before independence. So we've just taken it for granted. We have had good voter turnouts most of the time. 80% for a presidential, 75% for a general election. Those are the norm, right? But this time, if we're going to end up with 65% or less, that is really bad. And it's, it's going to be interesting to see where the drop was. Was it in the opposition parties or was it with the
so now
governing
when you say
party?
60 to 65% had gone to the polling booth, now we have two main political parties vying for the government in Sri Lanka, that is the post of Prime Minister. Let's take a look at the SJB and the NPP. Which was the party which we lost ground when it came to the elections?
Well, so far, from the two results we've had, clearly the SJB has lost ground, and this is what you might see this trend throughout the night.
Now we've had shows. Now you host Face to Face every week. Sonali hosts People's Platform on Fridays. Then we have Face to Face the Nation on Wednesdays at 9:30. Over and over again, individuals who have come on the show had said that the unity of these parties had been lacking subsequent to the presidential election. Why is that?
So, Shami, to have unity, you need to have a figure that you can rally around, right? For the NPP, that figure was Anurakumar Disanayak. Who's that figure in the Samali Janabala Bege or in the New Democratic Front? Is it Ranil Wickremesinghe? Is it Sajid Premadasa? Right? The reason that they are where they are right now is, sorry to say, they're leaderless and therefore rudderless.
Leaderless? Are you saying the SJB does not have the SJB does not have a leader to lead them?
Does it look like when you speak to the multiple people that have come on the programs, when you speak, do you feel like they're inspired by their leader? I don't get that.
But that's true, Nilesh, because if you look at the way in which how these political parties were doing their campaigns in the 11th hour, we did not see any significant campaigns launched by the SJB, even in the Colombo district, where their leader was running as a running mate for the post of Prime Minister.
You recall back in 2015 at the general election when the United National Party was running, in the Colombo district at least, you walk around and along with the candidates' face and number, you would also see the party leaders' face and number. How many on all of the forwarded messages you get on WhatsApp, on the groups, on the social media posts? How many of the SJB candidates were running with their leaders' picture as well?
I absolutely agree. The SJB has a huge crisis in leadership. It's not that the SJB is lacking talented, experienced people. It does have quite a few, and a lot of young leaders as well. They should have come out with a much stronger campaign.
But I'm trying to say, Nilesh, that Sajid Premadasa, who has been leading the party at 2 presidential elections now and lost both presidential elections, at least now has to step down and give the leadership of the party to someone else.
The SJB has to do
democracy right throughout.
The SJB has to do a lot of soul searching. Is it happy with this leader and possibly coming in second place in the next elections as well? Or is it going to try to win?
I mean, if they stick to the same formula, they're not going to come second place at the next election.
They might come in third place.
Third or fourth.
So very quickly, Tamesh, do we have the figures?
Yes, I do.
Elections?
Yes, the last election, Shamir, the Sri Lanka Potujana Perumuna secured 145 seats and the SJB got 54 seats, whereas the National People's Power was able to secure only 3 seats with 445,958 votes.
Right. So, Nilesh, given the fact that if you look at the numbers in the last presidential elections, the SLPP only was able to gain 248,000 plus votes at the last elections. Now, if you look at those numbers, do you think that the NPP would be able to go ahead with the 145 number of seats that the SLPP got back then in 2020 general elections?
Shamir, whatever gains the NPP will make tonight is the fault of the opposition. That's the SJB.
Nilesh, I know you don't have a crystal ball in front of you, or you're not even a soothsayer, but I just want to pick your brain very quickly. Do you think they would get a resounding majority in Parliament, and how much would that number be?
We don't expect a two-thirds majority. That was not expected. It's not something that even the NPP candidates were expecting. They want a majority, that's the 113, and perhaps a strong majority, which would be about 120, 125.
But on that subject, Dinesh, like we've seen, I know that you shouldn't put too much faith in but a lot of the polls that you've seen, the public polls, as well as some of the, let's say, private ones, did predict what numbers that you're talking about, between 125, 135, right? But they did mention that if voter turnout dips to the low 60s or under 60, then a two-thirds majority might be a possibility.
Right. So very quickly, Sonali, I just want to go back to the US presidential election that was held recently. We were talking about Kamala Harris being the first female president of the United States, why there was 56% of the eligible voters in the United States were women. But that did not happen. Why is that?
Yeah, that's interesting, Shamir.
56% of the eligible voters were women.
Absolutely.
And they did not want a woman to become president of the United States and lead them for the very first time.
I feel like policy had a lot to do with it, but also, yes, the internalized misogyny and the misogyny that we spoke of earlier during the program. And Shamir, what this has created, one of the effects of the Trump presidency that we see is the rise of the incel culture and the hyper-masculinity culture. We saw how, now you know that Roe v. Wade has been overturned by the previous Trump administration. Women effectively have no right to abortion, so women have lost the right to bodily autonomy through that, which has drastic impacts for rape, for incest, and a host of other reasons, right? And we see this incel culture rising, this hyper-masculinity culture rising, where these men, young boys, inspired by the Andrew Tates of today, saying, your body, our choice, which is quite distressing, damaging.
But at the end of the day, Sonali, what do you think about the people not voting for a woman in the presidential elections? Because if you look at these elections as well, we see a lot of newcomers coming into play. We see new faces. Do you think the people would have voted 196 members? Would there at least be a majority this time around of women?
No, absolutely not, Shamir. And I mean, this is just my personal opinion. I feel like our education system has a lot to do with it. Our cultures, religious beliefs have a lot to do with it as well.
So very quickly, Dinesh, what's your figure? Tomorrow evening, what would that figure be? NPP, how many seats?
I'd say around 125.
125. Sonali?
130.
130.
Yeah.
Nadeem?
Between 120 and 135.
Between 120 and 135. I don't want to guess or give any forecast yet with regard to who would be able to form a government following today's parliamentary elections. We'll have to wait and see. However, News First is all geared up to bring you the election results first and fast. Therul, can we expect a result anytime soon?
If the momentum is maintained, as I said, yes, of course, we can.
Right, so we are expecting 21 districts, 20 districts more to bring out their postal results, and we, of course, will be in the forefront to bring you the election results first and fast. Stay connected, stay with News First as we break the election results first and fast.
Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka. Decides. Sri Lanka decides.